How does one go from a talented and curious child to the most feared villain in the galaxy? The tragedy of Anakin Skywalker affected millions of people around the globe for the past nearly 50 years. Ever since the iconic black helmet of Vader was removed to reveal a human being, a father, a former Jedi, people wondered what could have caused him to have committed such atrocities. How could someone have fallen so far down such a dark path? And really, that's what made the prequel trilogy so special. George Lucas poetically illustrated the tragic story of his fall in a way that often doesn't get the credit it deserves. And so I wanted to revisit it because it goes so much deeper than most people realize. And I think it's a great example about how good storytelling goes a long way for these iconic characters. So without any more delay, let's dive right in. Anakin's fall to the dark side was one of the most tragic stories ever witnessed in cinema. To go from this happy-go-lucky kid who just wanted to be a Jedi and save his loved ones to becoming the most feared and ruthless villain in the galaxy. Anakin's fall was more than just a momentary decision to save his wife. It actually started a very long time before Revenge of the Sith. In fact, it started as a boy, with Anakin's first experience with the Jedi Order. The Order he idolized and wanted to become a part of rejected him, despite his enormous potential and him leaving his mother behind in slavery on Tatooine. When he faced the Council for the first time, Yoda made a very foreshadowing observation about Anakin. He said, "Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering." And George brilliantly weaved those themes into the course of the films. In The Phantom Menace, Anakin was fearful of leaving his mother behind to become a Jedi, fearful of never being able to see her again. And he wanted to become a Jedi so bad so that he could go back and free her. And the Jedi knew this. And instead of seeing it through a lens of compassion, they looked at it from a lens of judgment and decided that Anakin should not be trained, that he harbored too much fear. A tiny seed of resentment in Anakin was sown that day, a seed that only grew as he got older, and time again, he witnessed the Jedi's total disregard for his abilities and his contributions during the Clone Wars, abilities that Qui-Gon recognized far more than anyone else. He can see things before they happen. It's a Jedi trait. Qui-Gon was the only Jedi that actually nurtured Anakin like a father would. And that's why his duel at the end of the movie with Darth Maul was so important. George Lucas called it the Duel of the Fates, because it's really about who's going to train Anakin and how the galaxy is going to end up because of it. If Qui-Gon had lived, Anakin never would have fallen to the dark side. But unfortunately, as we saw, that wasn't the case. In Episode 2, we finally see a breaking point, a crack in Anakin's belief in the Jedi, and we see the moment his worst fear becomes a reality. Despite Anakin time and time again telling the Jedi about his visions that he was having, about his mother, he was ignored, told to let it go, that he's too emotionally attached. And eventually we see that his visions were right. As he gets impatient and goes to investigate, he finds his mother captured by the Sand People. Having been beaten and treated horribly, he finds her just in time for her to die in his arms, causing him to surge with an unfathomable rage that brings him to the second stage of his fall, as foreshadowed by Yoda, anger. It is here we witness the first time Anakin loses all sense of reason, responsibility, and rationality, and he brutally takes revenge on the Sand People for the death of his mother, causing a huge disturbance in the Force that was felt all the way across the galaxy by Yoda. This is where his fear turned to anger. Anger at the Jedi for holding him back, but even more so, anger at himself for not being strong enough to save her. And this really ended up becoming the driving force later on for his obsession with power and getting stronger. He told Padme, "I promise you, I will become the greatest Jedi ever. I'll even learn how to stop people from dying." He hated his own weakness, and it became an inferiority complex that consumed him and controlled him. By the time Revenge of the Sith rolls around, Anakin has a deep distrust in the Jedi. He feels like they don't trust him. He feels like they're hiding things from him, that they are using him to fight in the Clone Wars for his abilities, but ultimately won't grant him the rank of Master, which would give him access to a much more vast collection of Jedi knowledge that he could use to become stronger, that he could potentially keep that promise to himself and save people from dying. It's at this same time that he's having visions of his wife dying, the same way he had visions of his mother dying. And as he brings it up to Master Yoda, he's told once again to let it go. Let go of everything you fear to lose. But Anakin can't. He won't. He's desperate. His fear of loss, his need for control, and his inability to let go of his attachments make him defiant before the Jedi. And his belief in the Jedi after what happened to his mother is already so shaken at this point. He believes that he's powerful enough to save anyone if he could just learn how. And then there's Palpatine, who has masterfully positioned himself all the while into a place of trust and confidence for Anakin, telling him, "The Jedi don't trust you. They fear your abilities will become too great to control." Everything Anakin wants to hear, Palpatine provides, and to top it off, he tells him that it's possible to learn the power he's been seeking. He validates Anakin in a way that the Jedi never did, using his biggest fears to manipulate him and cause him to distrust the Jedi even more. After discovering that Palpatine was actually the Sith Lord behind everything, Anakin was conflicted. Does he let the Jedi kill him? The only person who's validated his worries, acknowledged his true potential, and has direct knowledge of the power to save people from dying, to save his wife. It was the perfect storm to allow for Anakin's turn to the dark side. With Anakin witnessing Mace Windu about to strike Palpatine down without a trial, it was over. He wasn't going to allow the hypocrisy of the Jedi to stand anymore. Everything that had bubbled up until that very moment came out in one desperate act to stop Mace from killing Palpatine, and at that moment, Palpatine knew he had him. He smiled with glee as he seized the opportunity to kill Mace and complete Anakin's turn into Darth Vader. Convincing him that the attack on the Jedi Temple would grant him the power he seeks, Anakin storms the temple with an army of clones and kills thousands of Jedi. But it wasn't until his duel with Obi-Wan on Mustafar where we really understood his viewpoint in all this, and just how much hate he had for the Jedi. He said to Obi-Wan that, from his point of view, the Jedi are evil, and his hate would only grow after losing the battle to Obi-Wan. His hate, his rage, his former life as a Jedi, that was over now, and it would lead him to the suffering and pathetic existence that was Darth Vader, thereby fulfilling Yoda's foreshadowing in The Phantom Menace and bringing about one of the darkest eras in galactic history. This was the tragedy of Darth Vader and the genius of George Lucas to have his fall so poetically illustrated. From fear to anger to hate to suffering, it's all there, and it's so raw and relatable, the way that you can empathize with a villain who terrorized the galaxy, because you can see what happened for him to become that way, and how despite a person's overwhelming potential for good, they can still be corrupted by fear and the desire for power. The humanity in his story is what makes the tragedy of Darth Vader so timeless, and there are very few stories like this. But I hope in the future of Star Wars there will be more, with different characters and different stories that can be told.